What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we are doing a tier list of all the Spider-Man movies, and this tier list suggestion comes from Theater Boy. If you would like a shout out for yourself, make sure to leave some suggestions for either tier list, ranking, random opinion video, whatever you want to hear me talk about. Let me know in the comments below, because if I use your suggestion in a video, I'll give you a shout out, and you can get a shout out just like Theater Boy just got. So before we actually jump into this tier list, I should probably say that I have actually seen all these movies within the last 4 months. I actually binge watched all of them leading up to the release of No Way Home, and I saw No Way Home twice. So I would say overall, they're all relatively fresh in my head, and I think I can rank this pretty good. Oh, and also, quick thing, I should probably mention this. I got a new camera, and I'm still kind of working out the kinks and like the colors and stuff like that. So if I look a little different, hopefully I can fix it by next video, but just so you know, if I look a little different, that's why. Okay, now with that said, let us get into the categories here. We have amazing, we have good, we have okay, we have bad, we have booty. So it's the usual suspects. However, I do want to say this right off the bat. While I don't love every Spider-Man movie, some of them I'm not a massive fan of, and they're not all great, there is no booty Spider-Man. There might be one that's pretty close, but there's no booty Spider-Man. I think they're all relatively good in their own way. Some aren't as good, but you'll see what I mean when we get to that in the list. So without further ado, let us jump into the list. So first, we're starting with Spider-Man 1 from 2001. Now, the thing about Spider-Man 1 is that when this movie came out, it completely just exploded. Like, it didn't just explode because of how popular it was. It made everyone just love Spider-Man. I mean, before this movie, I was actually a pretty big fan of Spider-Man, but this movie made him my favorite character, and I would say he was probably my favorite superhero in general up until maybe 2014 when I started liking Captain America more with Winter Soldier. And Spider-Man, man, he's the bomb. Overall, I think this is a perfect origin movie. The only thing I would say, while this movie is great on its own, if you compare it to some of the ones that come later, I think it kind of falls down a little bit. And not really in story or scope. It's more about the, I would say the CGI probably holds down this movie the most. Like, if I was going to complain about anything, when I rewatch these movies, the CGI in this movie, not all of it, but some of it is very rough. Especially like the Times Square part when they're flying around on the big balloons and stuff like that. Like, that didn't hold up. Like, at all. However, while it doesn't make the movie bad, it does somewhat take away from its overall ranking on this list. So I'm going to say, while this movie is still really good, I cannot put it in amazing. However, I would understand if you were to put it in amazing. Just for me, it's good. Maybe I understand an argument for okay, but you cannot put this one in bad, and if you do, you're just wrong. That's the way it is. So let us move on to the next one. So before I do Spider-Man 2, I'm actually going to move this further back because I want more time to talk about that later. So let's get some of the other ones out of the way. Spider-Man 3. Here's the thing. This movie, when it came out, is probably one of the first times I watched a movie and I honestly felt disappointed by the end. And it was like, while I was watching the movie, I really liked it. Even the Peter Stride, the Bully Maguire, you know what I mean? I liked it. I thought it was cool. And then when I left the theater, I was probably about 10 or 11 or 12 at this time. I was like, you know what? That movie wasn't as good as the first two. I remember thinking that, and I was like, I still liked it. I was entertained, but it wasn't as good as the first two. And as time went on, for a few years, it really started to get burned up by critics, and people really hated it. And I know there was a bunch of extra elements behind the scenes that really caused this movie to get pulled back. Specifically that one guy who's in charge of a lot of Spider-Man movies. He's not in charge anymore, but he was for a while, and he really messed up a lot of things. I don't remember his name. He just had really bad ideas, and unfortunately that always brought down all the Spider-Man movies. And then he'd always point at other people like, hey, it's your fault, I don't know his name, but you guys probably know who I'm talking about. But overall, Spider-Man 3, while at one time I would consider it bad, I think it's actually okay. Rewatching it recently, I thought it was very okay, almost good, actually. I just think it's because the biggest thing ultimately is Spider-Man 1 is good, and then Spider-Man 2 is just so good. So when Spider-Man 3 comes along, and it's just kind of, alright, it's it does feel like it's bad. But I don't think Spider-Man 3 is bad. However, I would understand an argument for people who say it is. I could understand an argument if you said it was good, but you can't call it amazing, and you definitely can't call this one booty. So I'm going to put this in the okay category. So I think that's good. That's a good spot. Next one, The Amazing Spider-Man 1. The truth is, rewatching this recently, I actually find it okay. I think it's like a high okay. If this would be more of like a middle to low okay, The Amazing Spider-Man is a high okay. And I think mostly it's because when I watched these movies recently, I watched them through like, how they came out, like the release order, right? So I started with Spider-Man 1, and then I went 2, 3, then I jumped to Amazing Spider-Man, then Amazing Spider-Man 2, and they're on and so forth and what have you, right? So I did that, and I think that may have actually taken away the overall experience of the Amazing Spider-Man movies, because on their own, the Amazing Spider-Man, at least the first one, is actually pretty good. It's like pretty decent. But when you compare it to the other Spider-Man movies, especially the ones that came before it, like Spider-Man 2, it does come down for me. So while I would say like on its own, it's a good movie, if you're comparing it like this in a ranking, I think it's just kind of okay. I'd say it's a high okay now. At one time I was pretty indifferent. I could say it's either bad or good, but I've come around to it and I think it's actually a high okay. So we're going to put it there. Actually, I'm going to move the Amazing Spider-Man 2 back here too, because we're going to talk about that one a little more as well. Let's get into the Tom Holland Spider-Mans here. We have Spider-Man Homecoming. So for me, I think this was a interesting film. For a while, I thought it was always just kind of okay. Rewatching it recently, I think it's still okay, but like a little bit better than okay. But I still don't think I can put it in good. I think it's like a high okay, like a little better than Amazing Spider-Man for me. And I think a big element has to do with the fact that it feels like a movie that was just put out because they wanted to make a Spider-Man movie. And that might just be me. But a lot of elements tie into the MCU where the movie itself has more Iron Man in it almost as much as it has Spider-Man. And it's almost like, I know it doesn't literally have, that, but like Iron Man's a big presence in the first two Spider-Man movies. And I feel like that might have been like the wrong call, because he's in this movie a lot. And not that I don't love Downey Jr. and Iron Man, I love him. But I feel like this Spider-Man movie needed to kind of spread its wings on its own, and it didn't get a chance to. So, still, I think it's okay. Like I said, it's a high okay for me, but I can't really say it's good. Maybe if I approach these movies again after a little bit, maybe like after a year, after No Way Home's out for a year or so, maybe I'll jump back into those movies and I'll get a different experience. Because I do think overall, even if you hated all these movies, like through all the releases, I think that No Way Home did a really good job of kind of bringing all of them up almost. Well, besides Into the Spiderverse. But it brought all of them up, even the ones that you consider bad, like Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3. Those are actually now pretty decent. So it's like interesting that that movie actually had the ability to do that. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. All right, next, let's jump into Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. For me, a lot of people disagree with me. And that's okay. You can disagree with me on this. However, I think it's actually like a low okay. Here's the reason. All right. Because while I do like the character, Miles is great. I love the premise. I think that overall the story is really well constructed and the animation is so different and interesting. It's really cool. However, overall, I just don't like the movie as much as I like the other ones. And that's not to say that I hate it, because I think it's decent. It's a decent movie. But if you're going to compare it to the other Spider-Man movies, I just don't think it's as good. I don't think it's bad. On its own, I could even see an argument for why someone would say it's good. But if we're comparing them, I don't think so. I think it's behind Spider-Man 3 for me. So, it's the way it is. Okay, so if any of you guys are still watching, you haven't clicked away out of anger, let's continue. We have Spider-Man Far From Home. Okay, so here's the thing about Spider-Man Far From Home. When I first watched it, I really liked it. And then when I watched it again, getting ready for No Way Home, it feels very strange. Like there are elements in this movie that don't really add up. And I feel like No Way Home has those elements too, but they do it better in No Way Home. Like Far From Home has a really cool premise, but the problem with the movie is that it like leans on this idea that there's this massive twist in the middle of the film. And then it happens, And we're all just like, yeah, duh. And it feels like the movie's like, whoa, you didn't see that coming. You didn't see Mysterio gonna do that. Whoa. And we're like, yeah, we definitely knew Mysterio was gonna be a bad guy. That's what he does. He's a bad guy. I actually thought it would have been interesting from like the trailers. They kind of sold it as if he was like a hero from another dimension, and I actually really liked that idea, and I was sad that they didn't go along with that. I really thought that it was going to be a different take on the character. I thought we were going to actually get a Mysterio who is good, and I thought that'd be interesting that maybe they down the line they'd introduce a Mysterio who's bad. I do like the movie more than Homecoming, so I'm going to put it at a high okay, but I don't know if I can put it at good, because the reason for that is just because of the premise itself. So overall, I do want to watch that movie more. I do think it's better than these other movies here, but I will say that they had a really cool way they could have gone, and then they didn't. And it's just kind of like, it brings the movie down for me a little bit. Okay, now let's get to Spider-Man 2. And guys, if you ever saw me talk about Spider-Man movies in the past, ever since I started back in the day, amazing. Let's be honest. The movie is amazing. It still holds up today. Some of the CGI is rough, but it still holds up overall. You know, there's a couple elements where I was like, that looks a little rough, but it is better than Spider-Man 1, which makes sense. It should be. And of course, guys, Doc Ock, man, he's still one of my favorite super villains. Well, he does become a hero in the end, so we'll just call him a superhero villain. Super anti-hero. Yeah, I'll say that. From the acting to the story to the fact that it feels like it's a burden to be Spider-Man. I think that's the one thing that Tobey just has over the other Spider-Men. No matter how much more they do. But for both Andrew and Tom Spider-Mans, while I love them, don't get me wrong, I really like them, they don't feel like they're burdened to be Spider-Man. You know, Tobey feels like it's actually like a burden to be him. Like, it feels like it sucks to be Spider-Man, but he does it because someone needs to. You know, he has the ability to help, so he has to. That's why Tobey is the best Spider-Man. You know, you can say he doesn't have as many quips, or he's not as agile, you know what I mean? He doesn't act like the comic book Spider-Man. But in the end of the day, to be Spider-Man should be to be the greatest burden. Because it feels great to do the right thing, even though it's going to cause problems in your own life. And I feel like Andrew and Tom never really had to deal with that. Well, I guess technically, you know, Andrew had to deal with it when Gwen dies. That's kind of more a bigger issue with that. But and then of course Tom, when everyone forgets his name and forgets about him. But overall, this movie just sells it. And of course, the train scene, guys, it still holds up. It's great. I love it. We're moving on to the next one. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's bad. I rewatched it. Here's the thing. Okay, I jumped into this movie recently before watching No Way Home, and I said to myself, I'm gonna give this a chance. I'm gonna go in with an open mind. I know when I watched this in theaters, I thought it was terrible. I thought it was the worst movie I ever saw, mostly because I went into it expecting something great. I got something moody. So I watched this movie in theaters, and then I never watched it again until just a few months ago. I went in with an open mind. I knew it was bad, but I said, I'm gonna give it a chance. And guys, it's still bad. It's not terrible. There are elements in it I do really like. Mostly Andrew and Emma's chemistry. It's super good. It's the only reason why I'd actually recommend this movie to anybody. Now, like I said earlier, No Way Home actually does bring this movie up a little bit more in my mind. It does make this movie better. So I think that's cool that it can actually do that with these other movies. However, while it is not a completely booty movie, it's still bad. However, I will say that the suit itself is my favorite Spider-Man suit. Okay, now we come to Spider-Man No Way Home. And guys, it's amazing. It's amazing. You can't argue with it. Sure, the story doesn't always line up right. It's kind of convoluted. Characters do stuff that they're not supposed to be doing, but here's the thing. It's awesome. It's just awesome. It is just quite simply an awesome movie from the beginning to the very end. It's so good. I cannot wait for me to get it. I got a 4K Blu-ray Steelbook coming. I cannot wait to pick it up and watch it in its nice 4K glory. So you may be asking, hey, why is Spider-Man 2 in front of No Way Home? So I'll explain that quick. For me, Spider-Man 2 is the ultimate Spider-Man movie. We have yet to have a Spider-Man movie that has beaten that. However, if we're talking about like an MCU standpoint, what is the best Spider-Man MCU standpoint where it's more of like mystical in nature? Then I'm definitely going to go with Spider-Man No Way Home. But if we're talking about Spider-Man movies ranking against each other, it's Spider-Man 2. I can't say this movie is perfect because in my mind, no movie is perfect. Even my like personal favorite movies aren't perfect. But I would say when it comes to it being a Spider-Man movie, it's near perfect for me. So yeah, it still holds up till today. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. So there you go, guys. That is my tier list for all of these Spider-Man movies. How would you rank these movies? Let me know in the comments below. Do you have any suggestions for future tier lists? Let me know down there as well. Please consider liking, subscribing, and turn notifications for more. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. Peace.